You're watching another great interview on Audio Inc. Radio. What's going on? It's Anne Erickson with Audio Inc. Radio. If this is your first time here, welcome. It's great to have you. And please subscribe. Also give this video a big thumbs up. The legendary Steve Hackett of Genesis is our guest, and we have a lot of great stuff to talk about. You know the drill. Let's get inked.
Hi there, this is Steve Hackett. You're watching Audio Inc. Radio with Anne Erickson.
What's going on? It's Anne Erickson with Audio Inc. Radio, and I'm very excited to be here with the legendary Steve Hackett. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you doing, Anne?
I'm good. I'm hanging in. How have you been doing during this crazy time in history?
Well, it's been a very productive time for recording, doing different projects, and finishing a book and getting that released. So it's been a very productive time in many ways. No gigs, lots of recordings.
That's not a bad thing. And you have
No.
the new record on the way, Under a Mediterranean Sky, which is really, congratulations on that. It's your first acoustic record in a long time. So tell me, why did you want to do an acoustic record again?
Well, I had an idea that at this point in time, when people can't travel, the idea of doing something which was both acoustic and orchestral and slightly exotic in terms of the places that we visit in music in each of those pieces gives a chance to travel, to have an inner journey to those places like Sirocco, which is the wind that travels throughout the Sahara. I visited the Sahara and seen many sides of it, the desert in Egypt, and to have gone to Petra in Jordan and Morocco, to get to see that from many sides and to try and do an accompanying piece of music, almost like a film for the ear rather than for the eye. I was very moved by that, as many of the places that I visited around the Mediterranean with my wife Jo. So we have a very Spanish-sounding track with a Spanish title, Andalusian Heart. We've got another track called The Memory of Myth, which really relates to Greece. It's done in a kind of Grecian style. In a way, it's an escapist album. It's very romantic. It's more virtuosic than I think the rock stuff that I do. But then there's also the exotic world music aspect with it, with the use of duduk and the tar and the charango, other instruments that you won't necessarily find in rock. So for all those reasons, I thought I'd do that first of all. After I did a live album, then the autobiography was released. And then I shall after that get on with the rock album that I'm working on. So it's one of a number of things in quick succession. There's a procession of things, brain children that couldn't have possibly come out while we were touring. I wouldn't have been able to go, this one's gone, this one. But it was a labor of love doing Under a Mediterranean Sky. I loved doing it, and I think it's for people who like not just the nylon classical guitar and flamenco, but also for those who appreciate the Arabian lute, the oud, the fretless lute, all those aspects of exotica that have crept into some of the rock stuff that I've done in recent years. And I thought, why not do that with an acoustic album?
I love the fact that it does kind of take you on a journey, because right now people can't travel. And so it kind of is that escape.
It is, yeah. I think there's an inner journey that accompanies the album. If you get taken by it, then it will take you places. And I usually listen to it every day. I've been very, very proud of it ever since we've done it. And sometimes I think, oh, why can't my rock stuff sound like this? With orchestrations like that. And then sometimes we use that influence and use one to influence the other. But I don't think of acoustic music as being any less powerful than rock. It's just a different emphasis. I'm influenced by all sorts of things, not just guitarists and the classical stuff, but also romantic composers of the 19th century and early 20th century as well. The Russians, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, great orchestrators, things that have become part of film soundtracks, stuff that has informed Hollywood is stuff that, although those guys didn't realize it at the time because there was no world of film at the time, subsequently it becomes part of the mainstream from a whole other source. So it happens quite naturally. Of course, with Hollywood film scores, there are the great scores. There's the Gone with the Wind stuff, which is basically classical music that enhances the film and in some ways outpaces the movies that they accompany. So, this kind of stuff shows up on classical albums all the time.
Do you have a favorite track on the record? I know that's so hard.
It's very hard, but I love the Middle Eastern influence of Sirocco. There's just something about it. My wife Jo and I had recently come back from a visit to Egypt, where we travelled up the Nile and did the classic journey, which is from one end of Egypt to the other via the Nile at a very slow, leisurely pace. And the Nile itself looks absolutely wonderful. They've kept it absolutely pristine. It's every bit as exotic as you might imagine that it can be, lined with palm trees. The method of travel is slightly different since Cleopatra's day with the barge and the oars, but that slow steamer going up that, it's got the Agatha Christie aspect, Death on the Nile, all of that. And the places that you stop at look like they were literally painted and constructed yesterday. So, it's a trip into Cecil B. DeThrill land. It's wonderful. And the echo of it stays with you. So Haunted by Egypt, I've now been twice, and each time I've got my notebook out the whole time, writing down melodies, and it's, let's just say that the influence is huge. So I absolutely love that, and I think it's the album possibly at its most filmic. The idea of trying to convey the idea of the pyramids, the Sphinx, but also other areas that are less well known. And of course, we got to visit the tombs and the designs on the wall, the way it's painted. It's just extraordinary, the vibrance of the colors. If you take no other holiday in your life and you're thinking of going somewhere else than where you live, I would recommend that trip on the Nile and go and visit all those places. If you see nothing else in your life, and just to see those giant statues and columns, and as I say, the stuff that became Hollywood dreams millennia after the event. Those countries are extraordinary. Of course, I'm more familiar with Norway, having travelled there many times to play, but also to holiday as well. That's an extraordinary place. We were in Bergen, the birthplace of Grieg, and you get those huge perspectives, of course, because you get, I guess, what people think of as the fields, the mountains. You get all of nature once you climb up, overlooking the town, and you think, this is truly symphonic scenery.
Mm-hmm.
No wonder it permeates the music, the beautiful music of Grieg, of course, big influence.
So we lost Eddie Van Halen this year, which was just, such a huge loss. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that, because I know that he, you influenced, his playing.
And he influenced mine too. And I think he was a wonderful guitarist. And I think many guitarists influence each other. I think it's a tremendous loss to the world of music. I do think that he was absolutely brilliant. There's almost been a sort of guitar cull recently. In other words, we've lost the brilliant Peter Green. I used to go and see him before he before he formed Fleetwood Mac with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, when Peter Green was working with John Mayall's Blues Breakers. Just after Eric Clapton had left, I started to go to see shows at that time, and I was astounded at what I was looking at there. So there's something that's so long lasting, the legacy of certain players like that, Eddie Van Halen, Peter Green, Hendrix, the magic of Hendrix, and still films are coming to light even now of stuff that Hendrix was doing in Hawaii, when you can see he's absolutely right on form, and just this explosive kind of symbiotic dance between himself and the guitar, and it's like a kind of human whirlwind. It looks like seeing someone from another planet. I've got lots of time for Hendrix and lots of time for Andres Segovia. Completely different, but I think if they'd seen each other, I suspect they probably would have been impressed with each other's artistry.
Do you have a highlight, like a favorite memory from your time in Genesis?
Well, yeah, I was thrilled that when we were a very young band back in 1973, we were touring the United States for the first time. And just as we were about to leave New York, desperate to get a gig elsewhere, anywhere in the States, we heard John Lennon had given an interview and had said that Genesis was one of the bands that he was listening to. So that was a very proud moment for me at that time. And the album we had, which was current at that time, was Selling England by the Pound. So I was thrilled that he'd given us a name check. That was quite something. We had not by any means made it at that stage, but to get the seal of approval from Lennon, who we all still marvel at in terms of as an imaginative brain and as a world leader in so many ways, was a huge big deal. I know it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal for Peter Gabriel, who was the one who said, "I just heard a story about John Lennon." So I know he was hugely proud of that.
Wow. Do you have a favorite Genesis record?
Well, funnily enough, Selling England by the Pound at that time, I think, was the perfect Genesis album. If anyone wants to know what Jurassic Genesis sounds like, really old Genesis, as opposed to the later Genesis, the one that found favor with MTV, I think the sort of the pre-video era, I think that Selling England has got all those aspects of so many things on it: social comment, different sort of instrumental techniques, pantomime, humor, serious stuff, funny stuff, very, very English, of course, and it had our first hit single on it, which was "I Know What I Like." But I don't think there was any compromises made on the album. I think it was a very imaginative album. I was very proud of it.
And what was it like being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? That's obviously, such a big honor.
Well, it was a big honor, and I think first of all, the evening started in a very stiff kind of manner because everyone's wearing DJs and stuff. It looks like a trip to the ballroom rather than to rock and roll. And gradually, as the evening wore on and people started to become more and more themselves, it took off like a rocket. And I know everyone in the room was moved. You could feel it. You could feel it as not just people on stage were being celebrated for their efforts, but also writers, many of whom had passed on. And, it's a sort of whole procession of stuff that was part of your DNA, your youth growing up, songs that the Ronettes did, other stuff, ABBA were being inducted that night. Jimmy Cliff was singing. Eric Burden of the Animals was singing. And, these were all on stage and you couldn't buy a ticket. I was trying to get Famous Friends in. And And I was being told, no, even if you had the $3,000 that the people were paying for this, it's all sold out. And it was not just a star-studded evening, it became a very personal thing as well. So it became very, very moving. And I think a great institution, and it's great that America did this and that it celebrates so many British artists, of course, because we in Britain didn't get that together. You guys came to it first of all, and wonderful to see people who were personal heroes of mine, and many of them are passed on, such as Paul Butterfield, wonderful singer, harmonica player, Mike Bloomfield, fabulous guitarist who worked in Butterfield's band and also was Dylan's guitarist, Bob Dylan's favorite guitarist, he said. And wonderful to see those guys celebrated, even if it's, years and years after they've passed. Nonetheless, the idea that, yes, this is something really worth celebrating. Would that it had happened in their lifetime, but I think in spirit, up there somewhere, they must be proudly been looking down. And also my pals in Yes, so many of whom I'd worked with. I know that on the night we attended, I know that my pal Chris Squire wanted to be there, and I knew that we couldn't get tickets for that. But when I was talking to the press during the evening, I was saying, I think it would be nice if not just Genesis gets celebrated here, but I think that Yes, it would be lovely if Yes got inducted. And many years later, or some years later, should we say, that happened. And I'm very pleased that there was a celebration of another band that we think of as prototype progressive. So, that was, it would have happened in Chris's lifetime, but better late than never.
Well, Steve, thank you. It's been awesome hanging out with you. I wish you all the best and congrats on the new record.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much, Anne.